Did Meghan and Harry really ask the Queen if they could name their daughter Lilibet?
The late Queen was not impressed by Prince Harry and Meghan calling their daughter Lilibet.
This morning, a new addition to the Sussex family. A baby girl named Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor, or Lily for short.
Apparently, there's a truce in the War of the Windsors, at least for now.
Queen has given her blessing for the couple to quit life as members of the royal family.
Support Harry and Meghan in their request to become part-time royals. The Queen's new message after a high-stakes summit acknowledging their wish to, quote, create a new life as a young family.
They're going to spend their time split between North America and the UK. This is part of the progressive new role that they want to play.
Prince Harry and Duchess Meghan telling the world about their baby girl, Lilibet Diana, named for two influential women in Harry's life, his grandmother and his mother.
The couple's second child is named after her great-grandmother, the Queen, and her late-grandmother, the Princess of Wales.
Throughout her life, she was called Lilibet by her parents and grandparents and of course by her late husband.
Your Royal Highness, do you have any wishes for your new niece, Lilibet?
Oh, I wish her all the very best. I can't wait to meet her.
Well, they've chosen Lilibet, which is the nickname that was given to the Queen when she was a little girl. So it's deeply personal and really an incredibly intimate name for the Queen.
Toxic do you believe the entire relationship is at this point?
Well, I think it's very toxic. I think they do their best, the Windsors, Prince Charles, the Queen, to keep it cool.
The Queen was not asked. The palace source is absolutely adamant. There was no permission asked, no permission granted.
In June 2021, 2 months after Prince Philip was lowered into the royal vault at Windsor, a baby girl was born in a Santa Barbara hospital. Her parents gave her a name that had belonged for nearly a century to one woman alone. They told the world the Queen had been supportive. They said she would not have used the name otherwise. But behind palace walls, a very different story was already taking shape. And according to royal biographer Tom Bower, the truth about what Harry actually said to his grandmother before naming that baby has never matched the version the Sussexes gave the public. The Queen, it turns out, was not asked. She was told. If you want more deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe to Royal Archives. The name Lilibet was never just a name. It was the most private word in Elizabeth II's life. It was given to her by her grandfather, King George V, when she was a toddler who couldn't pronounce Elizabeth. It stuck. Her father, George VI, used it. Her sister, Margaret, used it. And for 73 years, the man who used it most was the man she married. Prince Philip called her Lilibet in private letters, in quiet moments, across a marriage that outlasted prime ministers and presidents and entire generations. When he died in April 2021, the Queen placed a handwritten note on top of his coffin. 2 words. In loving memory, Lilibet. That was the last time the name was meant to be used. 63 days later, it was used again. The announcement came from Montecito on June 6, 2021. Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor. The press release praised the Queen. It called the name an honor. Within hours, the world had absorbed the story exactly as the Sussexes wanted it absorbed. As a tribute. A loving gesture. A bridge across an ocean that had been growing wider since the Megxit announcement 18 months earlier. And for about 48 hours, that version held. Then, the BBC's royal correspondent Johnny Diamond reported something that cracked it open. A palace source told the BBC that the Queen was never asked about the name, never consulted. The Sussexes had not requested permission. They had announced a decision already made. Within minutes of that broadcast, the response from Montecito was furious and unusually fast. A spokesman released a statement insisting that Harry had spoken with his grandmother before the birth, that he had shared their hope of naming their daughter Lilibet in her honor, and that, had she not been supportive, they would not have used the name. Then came the lawyers. Aggressive libel specialists at the firm Schillings sent legal letters to the BBC and other outlets demanding retractions. The Sussexes were not just denying the story. They were threatening to sue anyone who repeated it. And that's when things changed. because the palace did something the palace almost never does. It refused to play along. Buckingham Palace declined to deny the BBC's reporting. No statement was issued backing up the Sussex version. No source was offered to support the claim of permission. The silence from inside the gates was, in royal terms, deafening and pointed. In Tom Bower's account of the entire saga in his 2022 book Revenge, the dispute is laid out exactly this way. Bower quotes Meghan's then spokeswoman Toya Holness defending the name Choice. He notes the legal threats, and he draws the conclusion that has shaped every honest account of the story since. The Queen was not asked in any meaningful sense. She was informed. There is a difference, and that difference is the entire story. What happened next surprised even close advisors. For more than 2 years, the truth of what passed between Harry and his grandmother in that final conversation sat behind palace walls. The Queen did not speak publicly about it. She would not. That was not her style. Never had been. But the people around her began to talk, slowly at first. Then, after her death in September 2022, more freely. Aides who had been in the room, staff who had seen her face when the news broke, and in January 2024, royal biographer Robert Hardman published a book that would, for the first time, reveal the Queen's exact words to her aides in the days following the naming announcement. According to Hardman's reporting in Charles III, New King, New Court, one senior royal aide described the Queen in that moment as angry as I'd ever seen her. Not disappointed, not hurt. Angry. And then came the line that, more than any other, exposed what she had actually felt. She told her aides, I don't own the palaces, I don't own the paintings. The only thing I own is my name, and now they've taken that. Read that again. The only thing I own. This was a woman who had given 70 years of her life to a job she did not choose, who had watched 3 of her 4 children's marriages collapse in public, who had buried a husband 2 months earlier, who had said goodbye to him with the only word that had ever been entirely hers. And now, in the grief of that loss, she was watching that one private thing, the name her grandfather gave her, the name Philip whispered to her for 7 decades, being used as the centerpiece of a press release she had not approved. Behind closed doors, the conversation took an unexpected turn, because the palace, according to Hardman, refused to be, as he put it, co-opted into propping up the Sussex version of events. There would be no joint statement, no royal source confirming permission, no quiet acknowledgement that everything was fine. The Queen, even in her own measured way, drew a line, and that line is what Tom Bower confirmed in print 1 year later. The Queen had not given the kind of consent the Sussexes claimed. The conversation, whatever its exact words, had not been a request. Harry had not asked, he had told. Years later, Hugo Vickers, and perhaps the most respected royal historian writing today, would put it more bluntly than anyone else has dared. Speaking on the Daily Tea podcast in April 2026, promoting his new biography, Queen Elizabeth II, A Personal History, Vickers was asked whether the naming wasn't actually rather sweet. His response was immediate. Oh, well, that was odious, he said. He went further. To use the Queen's name that was used by her actual private family? No, that's absolutely shocking. The Queen, he said, was furious. And when his interviewer pushed back, citing the Sussex statement that the Queen had been supportive, Vickers did not soften. She said they did, but no, they didn't. No, the Queen was furious. This is the story behind the story, and it matters because the public version, the one the Sussexes pushed in June 2021, the one the lawyers tried to lock down with legal threats, the one that still circulates today, has now been contradicted by 3 separate authorities. Tom Bower in 2022, Robert Hardman in 2024, Hugo Vickers in 2026. 3 biographers working independently with separate sources inside the palace, all arriving at the same conclusion. The Queen was not asked. The Queen was angry. The Queen, in her own quiet way, never accepted the version of events the Sussexes presented to the world. The next day, and the days that followed, the Queen carried on. She made no public statement. She sent no message. She did not feed the press. That was never how she handled grief or hurt or betrayal, and according to those present, she felt all three. What she did instead was tell the people closest to her how she actually felt. And those people eventually told the rest of us. What the private conversation revealed was not just a disagreement over a name. It was the moment the Queen understood, perhaps with full clarity for the first time, what her grandson had become. This was the same grandson who, in his memoir, Spare, would later describe his grandmother in warm terms. The same grandson who, at the Invictus Games in April 2022, sat for an NBC interview and said he and the Queen had a really special relationship. He said they talked about things that she can't talk about with anybody else. He said he was protecting her, making sure she had the right people around her. That interview aired 10 months after the Lilibet announcement. By then, behind the scenes, the Queen had already told her aides what she really thought. Across social media, one question kept coming up after Hardman's book was published. If the Queen had truly given her blessing, why did the palace refuse to confirm it? Why did Buckingham Palace, an institution that has spent a century smoothing over family disputes for the cameras, let this one sit? Critics were quick to highlight the answer, because to confirm the Sussex version would have required the Queen to participate in something she had not agreed to. And whatever else she was not a woman who said things she did not mean. And whether it's fair or not, one name kept surfacing in every honest account of how this happened. Meghan. Because the public framing of the announcement, the carefully worded press release praising the Queen, the legal letters, the choreographed insistence that this had been a tribute, all of it bore the fingerprints of the Sussex communication strategy that had defined their post-royal life. According to Hardman's sources, the Queen herself recognized this. She did not blame Harry alone, but she understood perhaps too late that the boy she had once known had become part of something she could not reach anymore. There's another detail that has emerged in the years since, and it deserves attention. The Sussexes, after their legal letters to the BBC, never followed through. No lawsuit was ever filed. No retraction was ever issued by the BBC. The story that the Queen had not been asked sat in the public record, unchallenged in court, even as the Sussex camp continued to insist privately that the original BBC report had been wrong. That gap between the threat and the action is itself revealing. Lawyers send warning letters when they want a story to disappear. They file lawsuits when they want to prove a story is false. The Sussexes did the first. They never did the second. By the time the Queen died in September 2022, the Lilibet naming dispute had quietly become one of the unresolved wounds of her final 18 months. She had not seen her great-granddaughter in person. She had met Lilibet only once, during the Platinum Jubilee in June 2022, a brief private encounter at Windsor with no photographs released, no public moment, no acknowledgement from the palace beyond confirmation that the meeting had occurred. There would be no second meeting. The Queen would die 3 months later, and the name she had given up, the name that had been hers and Philip's and her father's and her sister's, would now belong to a child she barely knew, living 7,000 miles from the home where the name had been born. The private conversation, the one Harry had with her before the birth, has never been fully described. What the Queen said in that moment, what tone she used, what she understood Harry to be asking, none of it has been put on the record by anyone who was there. What we have instead is the aftermath, the aide who saw her face, the line about owning nothing but her name, the palace silence, the legal letters that went nowhere, and 3 biographers working with separate sources, all confirming the same thing. She had not given the kind of consent the Sussexes claimed. But the story doesn't end there, because what happened with the Lilibet name was not just about one decision or one announcement or one family argument. It was a moment that revealed, more clearly than perhaps any other, how completely the trust between the Queen and her grandson had broken down. He did not ask her, he told her, and then he told the world she had said yes. That sequence, The not asking, the announcing, the public framing, the legal protection of the framing has become the template for how the Sussex story has been told ever since. And the more time passes, the more biographers come forward with what they actually heard from inside the palace walls, the harder it becomes to defend the version of events that has held for almost 5 years. The Queen, in the end, kept her dignity. She did not fight publicly. She did not correct the record. She did not give an interview, write a letter, or release a statement. She did what she had always done. She let the truth come out on its own time, through the people she trusted, after she was gone. And now it has. The question that remains is not whether Harry asked. We know he didn't. The question is what happens next. What happens as more aides speak, as more biographers publish, as the gap between the Sussex version and the palace version grows wider with every passing year. Because the story of the Queen and the name she gave away is not finished. It is, in many ways, just beginning to be told. If you've made it this far, you understand why this matters. Subscribe to Royal Archives for more of the stories the palace would rather you forget. The private conversations, the unguarded moments, and the truths that only come out once the doors close for good. There is more to come, and the Queen, even now, still has things to say.